Hello everyone, my name is Jessie and welcome to Plot Twists. So today I'm going to be doing my 2021 book stats. While I did use Goodreads to track most of my reading last year, I have switched over to using StoryGraph, and StoryGraph automatically graphs pretty much everything I wanted to go over today. And I have imported all of my previous stuff, so I am going to use 2021 StoryGraph stats. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to start with my 2021 book stats with going over the moods of the majority of the books that I read last year. I found this breakdown pretty interesting because I don't feel like I read a lot of mysterious books, but I guess I do. So my top 5 book moods in order were adventurous, mysterious, emotional, dark, and reflective. Not really surprised by any of the rest of them. I'm definitely drawn into books that have an emotional component. People have in the past pointed out that I like to read dark books. I think reflective books are important because it shows that the characters are reflecting, thinking about the actions that they've made and making decisions based upon that, which should be the case anyway. And then adventurous, I feel like that just naturally most books, especially fantasy, which is one of my favorite genres to read, just kind of falls into that category. So other than that, not super surprised here. Thought it was kind of interesting that I have quite a few books that fall into funny. Not really sure how any of the books I read last year qualify as funny, but I don't know. I guess they had funny moments. All right, moving on. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the pace of the books that I read last year. I am not super surprised that they're majority fast and medium paced books. Most slow paced books don't seem to keep my attention. However, I do feel like I personally read a lot more slow paced books last year. And maybe if you compared these stats to 2020, 16% would still be higher than typical, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that it's still only 16% of my books. Moving on. Okay, so while initially looking at this graph, 97% fiction, 3% nonfiction, clearly I'm not reading a whole lot of nonfiction. However, this is also the first year that I've had any nonfiction in my year wrap-up, and I think that's something to be proud of. I read 2 nonfiction books this year, and my goal is to continue to improve upon that, so we'll see what happens this year. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about are the genres of the books that I've read. 100% unsurprised that number 1 is fantasy and that the majority of the books I read last year are fantasy novels. Followed up by YA, not super surprised there. Science fiction, contemporary romance, comics, because I read quite a few manga last year, as well as quite a few Star Wars based comic books. Pretty proud of LGBTQ being 5 books that I read last year. Still room for improvement, but definitely better than it has been historically. And looking just at kind of sort of everything else that falls down there. I'm not sure exactly why music or politics or psychology or sports or pop up, because I think I would classify those as nonfiction based categories, but maybe it's saying like that particular topic was brought up in one of the books that I read. I don't know. Okay, this particular stat is definitely something that I'm working on for 2022, and it's definitely one of my goals. So I have a horrible inclination to overrate books. And I think this really became apparent when I was trying to narrow down my top 10 books this year, and I had 38 what I considered a 5-star read. There's no possible way all of these should be labeled as 5 stars. And when I started to pare down like what my favorites were, it was easy to tell which ones should have been rated, 4 stars or maybe even lower. I will say because I was using Goodreads last year, there were no half stars, and using StoryGraph this year, there will be both quarter and half stars, and I think that'll help kind of in and of itself, at least not to have so many 5-star reads when clearly they weren't all my favorites. But yes, so this is my ratings for the year. So this next piece I actually found extremely interesting. So this is by month, books read versus pages read. You can see in general there's just an overall downward trend, and you can see where I kind of dropped off and just completely stopped reading. I did kind of pick up there a little bit at the end of December, but it just, September, November, December were not great reading months for me. And I think that's partially because I burned myself out with one of the reading challenges that I gave myself, which was reading a lot of high fantasy this year. Not that that's necessarily a problem, and I really do enjoy high fantasy. I think it's just I read so much of it, and they're such big books, that by the end of the year, the idea of reading another high fantasy book, I just wanted to do anything but read. So for that reason, that's kind of what inspired one of my 2022 goals as well, which is if I'm not feeling a book, put it down. And I'm not necessarily saying like increasing the number of books that I DNF, although that might happen just naturally as a result of that, but more or less saying we're going to put these on a I'll come back to it shelf kind of thing. And hopefully that'll help. And this last graph here, I just wanted to share for fun. So like I said, I read a lot of high fantasy last year and was trying really hard to work my way through Brandon Sanderson's entire catalog. And as you can see here, while I still have 3 more books to go in the Stormlight archive and, you know, some sub series, I have read pretty much his catalog. And I just thought this graph was bizarre to look at, you know, other authors. I've read like 2 or 3 books, and then there's Sanderson that I read 16. So I just thought I would share this. It made me giggle. Alright guys, so that wraps up my 2021 book stats. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I try to post content every 5 days or so, but at least once a week. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye!